Hello, I'm Dan Alexander. Thanks for joining me on another of my video excursions. If you like these videos, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. I'm here today to do an interview with Mike Bridavsky, who runs Russian recording in Bloomington, Indiana. He's one of the world's best known experts on Russian microphones. And something that I know virtually nothing about. And and I'm looking forward to learning a little bit about it, and hopefully you'll enjoy it also. So, Mike, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. That's a wild looking microphone you got set up there. I just want to say that I'm going to fix this shock mount really soon. I'm right on that. Uh, so, how's business in Indiana?
Oh, it's pretty good. It comes and goes. It's not like Bloomington, Indiana is the mecca of uh, recording studios, but we're essentially located, and we offer some pretty unique stuff, like over 200 vintage Russian mics. So yeah, we're doing okay. The pandemic's been tough at some times, and sometimes it's fine. Right now we're in a lull, but the
Yeah,
summer we were booked every day, so you never know how it goes.
a lot of people that I know in the business have suffered as a result. It's been tough for everybody. So I, who are the major manufacturers of professional microphones in Russia? And historically, when did the microphone industry begin in Russia? Obviously, it was always in the Soviet era. Um, and was it ribbon mics or condenser microphones? And who were the major designers?
Yeah. Well, this is a pretty complicated question. I guess we should start by saying that this is Soviet Russia, right? So it's communism. they're not uh, they're not commercially producing microphones. It's the government producing microphones for the people. So they're not making these mics to sell them. They're not making them to export them. And especially in the early years, microphones are a brand new invention, and everyone's trying to figure out how to make them better. And so there aren't really microphone manufacturing companies per se. And I believe that I'm not that familiar with the early microphones, but my guess is they were crystal mics to begin with.
Mike, when is early?
I believe the earliest I've seen is 20s, late 20s, early 30s. The earliest specimen I had was a ribbon microphone, the ML3, which says there was an ML2 and an ML1 before it. I believe the year was 1931, possibly 32. So very early. And this microphone, I called it the Monster. I don't have it anymore. Actually, I traded it, but it looks like a RCA 44 on top. It's a large ribbon mic, and it had this enormous body. I think the mic weighed almost 20 pounds, and it had a tube amplifier inside of the body of the microphone.
Is it a ribbon or a condenser?
It is a ribbon mic. So it was a ribbon mic with the tube preamp inside of it, two huge transformers. I mean, this thing was unbelievable. And it sounded crazy. So to give you a background, so like Russian cinema was a big deal. That's what the Soviets cared about. In fact, in all these research laboratories and manufacturing plants, they had a picture of Lenin with a quote from him that said, on the wall, that said, "The most important art form for us is cinema." So cinema was a big deal. They gave these engineers extra money and extra attention to develop the best cinema equipment, microphones included. So early on, these were research laboratories that were making these microphones. And some
Were
people
they were they connected with the government or with the military or?
with the government. Yeah, everything is connected to the government.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Mhm.
with Soviet Russia, right? So the vintage Soviet microphone manufacturers that most people are familiar with are Lomo and Octava. And a lot of people think that that's a brand name, but that's not a brand. Those are just two different factories, two different plants that manufactured microphones. So the Lomo plant actually, let me see here. I wrote all this stuff down. So where is it? So Lomo actually stands for Leningrad Optical Mechanical Association. They made cameras, they made lenses, they even made missiles, they made military stuff. It's a huge factory. And one of the things they made were microphones, a very small part of it. And same with Octava. Octava was just a manufacturing plant, but they did specialize in audio equipment and microphones. And a lot of the microphones they made were consumer grade dynamic mics. And I believe some of the earliest mics are from the 30s as well, from the Octava plant. But all of these microphones were developed and designed and engineered in
Don't worry about it.
No worries. They were developed in these different laboratories. So it gets complicated, but basically the Lomo microphones were originally developed. The history is crazy. So there's two sides. There's the Lomo side and the Octava side. So early Lomo microphones were developed by different bureaus. One's called the CKBK, the Central Bureau of Construction for Cinema Industry Equipment, and the Ministry of Culture. And they developed these mics and they made them in small quantities. And then some of these microphone designs eventually went into mass production at the Lomo plant. And those are the Lomo mics that a lot of people know, the 19A9s, 19A19s, and well.
And when were those manufactured?
So the Lomo factory didn't start manufacturing until the 50s, I believe, the late 50s. But some of these mics predate the Lomo here, the Lomo factory. I'll show you one here. And also a lot of these microphones are based on the classic microphones of the time made by the Germans, by Neumann. Here, this is an extraordinarily rare mic. It is a 19A1. A lot of people refer to it as a Lomo 19A1, but it's not Lomo. Lomo wasn't around. This is made in 1955. I think about 250 of these were ever made. I don't know if you can see, there's a little KA logo.
Yeah.
The KA stands for KINAP, and KINAP is short for Kino Apparatura, which means cinema equipment. So KINAP was just a general term for the laboratory that was designing cinema equipment. So this here is a 19A1. I've looked for one of these for about 20 years and finally found one. It's not in great shape. It's missing screws, but I can show you the inside and you can tell me if it looks familiar.
Oh, of course. My gosh. It's obviously an imitation in some fashion of an M49. It looks
exactly what it is. In fact, the first 50 of them used genuine Neumann M7 capsules. This is the 19A1. It was
what did the follow-up, the following ones use?
So there's a variety of capsules. So the early capsules, I'll show you the 19A2/19A3.
When's that microphone from?
This one's from 1955.
55, okay.
So here's another true.
I'll tell you, that's only, I think that's only 4 years after Neumann released the M49.
I'm sure that they came out with it. We're researching it in the same year. And that's serial number 200 something. So, and their serial numbers, from what I understand, don't go by year. They continue through the following years, right? So like serial number 1 would have been maybe 19. Yeah. So this here probably.
Although I don't know what it was like in Russia, but for example, in the Fender factory, there was just a basket of serial number plates. And the ladies who were assembling the guitars would just reach in there and pull one out and put it on. So what's his face from Pink Floyd, David Gilmour, he had Fender Stratocaster serial number 1, except it was actually made like 6 months after they started selling them.
That's crazy. Yeah.
So I don't know what it was like, but
I'm sure there's
manufacturers don't think about preserving the chain of serial numbers
no
for historical reasons, right?
no, right. They're
Yeah.
just throwing them on there.
Yeah.
But so it's interesting because the 1981 clearly was a copy of the M49. This is a 1983, and the 1982 looks just like it. And I'll tell you more. But does this look familiar to you?
Yeah.
Well, it looks like a C12. And
it also can you hold it up a little bit, and can you turn it around? Can you spin it? No. That's
which way do you want me to spin it?
Yeah, the grill looks like a C12, but the body looks sort of like a there's this,
Gefell.
yeah, exactly. There's some Gefell thing.
Well, so I have the original brochure. I'm obsessive about collecting all the documentation.
That's awesome.
The original brochure, and by the way, the original brochure states very specifically that the 1981 is a copy of the M49. The 1982 is very distinctly a copy of the C12. And this is a 1983. It's the same mic, except they discovered that for their needs in cinema, they didn't need the multiple patterns. So they made a cardioid only version. So this is just a cardioid only C12, basically. It uses a very similar CK12 type capsule, edge terminated, looks almost identical. So the first early Soviet mics were copies. Let me show you the 1984.
I hope they had a better time manufacturing those capsules than the Austrians did.
Well, what's interesting is I'm not going to take it apart now, but that capsule, it clearly they applied the gold differently. It looks like it was a spray on gold. So I'm not sure I haven't gotten that one to work yet, but here, this probably looks familiar to you.
Oh yeah. Looks like an M221.
And that's what it is. This is the 1984. So they copied the 221. Now this, interestingly enough, and it has the same turning capsule with the 2 polar patterns.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like a 221, but it sounds fantastic. Like the 221s are pretty bright and clear, and this is a very warm, velvety sounding mic.
I always found the 221s to be sort of, a little tinny sounding.
Yeah, that's the opposite. It almost sounds like a ribbon mic. It's actually a beautiful sounding mic. So then after the 4, they started.
It's got a tube inside of it?
Yeah, these are all tube mics. Yep.
What kind of tube is in that?
So the 1982 uses a very famous Soviet tube, the 6. Oh, I'm going to screw it up because I'm in an interview. The 6J6 tube. Is that right? I should have wrote this down. But it's the same tube that's used in Lomo 1989, which is a more common, probably the most famous Lomo mic. Here, hold on.
Would a Russian 6J6 tube be the same as a Western 6J6 tube?
That's why I'm not sure if it's 6J6 because I'm.
Okay, no biggie.
Yeah, I'll have to. I feel foolish, but you know how this goes.
Are they still making tubes in Russia?
I believe. I believe they are. I don't. I'm not sure if they still are. Are they? I believe they are. I looked this up. I know there's still a huge supply of them, and that I believe so, because a lot of modern manufacturers are now using the 6S31B tube, which is basically a Soviet AC701. And I believe Neumann's using them. I know.
Is it physically like an AC701?
It is in size. I believe it's pretty close. It has a different heater voltage. A lot like the, you probably know the 60H3, that proprietary Sony tube they made.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, like that, but it's a very common tube, and it's extremely stable, and they are very reliable. They're great tubes. So those are contained in some of the later Soviet models, like the 19A19 and the which I have here. Hold on. This is one of the more well-known Lomo tube mics. Can you see it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've seen those pictures of them and such. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the later area. This is the last tube mic they made. It's a fantastic mic. It uses that 6S31B tube. It uses a proprietary edge terminated capsule. So it looks like a CK12, but it actually, I think it has 2 or 3 back plates. It's a very interesting design, a great sounding mic. So that's what I was getting to, is that the early mics are copies, and then they started developing their own diaphragms that were obviously influenced on the M7 and the CK12 capsule. But once you start getting into the, this is a very rare one of 20 made. This is considered a 19A5, and it uses an M7 style capsule, but it's now sort of a proprietary design. And this,
that's what's that got for a connector?
this uses a 5-pin connector, and this is a hard to find one. And then this evolved into the probably the most famous and recognizable Soviet tube mic, the 19A9, which recently became very popular because Steve Albini used these on Nirvana's In Utero for overheads and on vocals, I believe. And here's an early version of the 19A9 called the KMD. It just has a different look, but these are great mics.
Cool.
And yeah, and so they use a M7, a single-sided M7 capsule. They're cardioid only, and they have this very interesting tuning mechanism where you have to tighten the back plate just right to get the spacing right.
So is the diaphragm on that gold sputtered PVC?
It's gold sputtered, and I believe it is Mylar. When was Mylar invented? You would know that.
Well, then it's not exactly an M7, is it?
No, these are not. So this is once they switched to their proprietary design. Starting, I believe, yeah, the 19A9, as far as I know, is like their first sort of their own proprietary design. And the mic I'm talking into now, and one thing you'll notice is that Russian tube mics are all very small. All their tubes are tiny. So this is maybe one of the bigger ones. Let me see if I can open this one up. I'm not sure if I can. It's pretty tight.
Yeah, don't, you know.
Yeah, no, this one's not. Some of them come loose pretty quick, but this one doesn't. So yeah, and then after the 19A9, there's 19. So I've obsessed over obviously there's a 10, 11, 12. I've found almost all of them. I have a 19A10, which they only made a very few number of, I think about 100. And this is a very interesting design. It uses a proprietary edge terminated capsule, double-sided. Each side of the capsule feeds its own tube and its own transformer. So it's basically 2 mics in one. And then it goes to the power supply, the 2 signals, the audio signals. Then they go to a transformer, a passive transformer-based switch box that has a matrix that blends the 2 capsules and their polarities to create a variety of polar patterns, and then a single output.
Wild. It looks just, you know, it really looks like a Gefell microphone, doesn't it?
This one does, yeah. But so this is a multi-pattern version of.
I'm surprised that the Russians weren't importing Gefell microphones.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, you know, the Soviets had a lot of pride, so they always thought they could do things better, do it their own, and it's cheaper for them. So they did import some things. For example, reel-to-reel tape machines. It didn't make fiscal sense for them to develop and manufacture analog reel-to-reel tape machines, so they brought in Studers. But I think with microphones, they probably found that it was more resourceful to make them themselves.
Well, it's a lot easier to build a microphone than a tape recorder.
Yeah, right. So this is a 19A13. I would say this is the most desirable Soviet mic. People are waiting decades to try and find one.
And this is called a what?
19A13.
Uh-huh.
So what people don't know is, so this 19A10 is basically a multi-pattern version of the 19A13. It's the same capsule except single-sided, the same tube, same transformer. Everything's the same except that it's just cardioid only. And obviously the body's different. Very unusual design. It's a beautiful sounding mic. There's nothing like it. It's just amazing like how small this microphone is, and the capsule, transformer, and tube are all inside of it.
I'm just curious. I'm sure, obviously, you must have a selection of older, C12, U47, M269 type microphones. And
Yeah.
I assume, you've obviously compared these microphones to those microphones. And,
Yeah.
what's your, objective comparison there? Not specifically, but just in general.
They're the Lomo mics are unique mics that they really well, sure, we can say like to an untrained ear, a microphone sounds like a microphone, but to those of us that care about this stuff,
Actually not. Actually not. My experience is that in a blindfolded A/B comparison, almost anybody who listens will say, "Oh yeah, I like the way that one sounds."
Sure,
And
sure,
the thing is, most of the time they're right. It's not. It's not. You can't compare a U87 to a U47 and pick the U87. Nobody does.
True, but I guess I'm talking about subtleties, right? So one thing I can say is the later Soviet mics, they aren't trying to sound like one of those mics, and they have a sound profile all to themselves. Generally speaking, I find them to be much smoother on the top end, so they don't have like a C12 type air, well, except for that C12 copy. A very balanced and neutral sound, quite a bit of saturation, depends on the model. Some of these earlier ones come with unregulated supplies, which have a little bit more compression to them. But I'm in love with the Lomo sound, especially my favorite mics like the 13. But I typically like sort of, I don't want to say hyped, but a milder presence peak. But not all of them. There's the 1918 is a pretty bright and articulate mic. And you get to know all of them. And all of them were intended for a different purpose, right? So some of the like distance voice mics have a brighter presence peak to, for cinema, to as boom mics and things like that. But they're definitely unique sounding. And I have a C12 in my collection. None of the Lomos really sound quite like a C12. I have some that come close, but like my 19A9 and my 19A13, those are mics that I have never found a replacement for. There's nothing really like them.
Very interesting. Very interesting. That's your knowledge is deep. So these companies are still manufacturing microphones today?
No, and like I wanted to say is that they're not, so they weren't never companies. There's basically research institutes that develop these mics. So this, for example, is a Len-Canap KMD. KMD stands for Condenser Microphone Designed by Dubrov. Dubrov is the engineer that designed this. This is the early version before Lomo was a factory. It was very successful. They manufactured a lot in these very small quantities in these research laboratories. They're handmade. And
okay,
then,
so I guess my question is,
yeah.
So what happened when the Soviet Union collapsed?
Yep.
And I assume that today that Lomo and whatever is actually some functioning as a company. No?
Well, it's complicated. So Lomo folded. Lomo, like I said, their main focus, like we know them as microphones, but that microphones were a small part of what they manufactured. They made missiles, optical lenses, telescopes, who knows what. But there was a small part of it that eventually became known as CKBK NPO Ekran, and they specialized in developing microphones and audio equipment for the TV industry. And then those later Lomo models, which I have some, I don't have them with me. These are, we're in the 90s now, so they're solid state transformerless designs. The guys that were working there split off two ways, and you might be familiar with Nevaton microphones. So Nevaton, they seem to cater to the classical market. And I have these later Lomo designs, these microphones, the 19A55, the 57, the 53, and they look virtually identical. They're almost the same as the mics that Nevaton's making now. And then you were right about Octava. So Octava was just a factory, and when all that collapsed and the free market
Well, I'm definitely not right. I'm just
Well, what you were implying, that did happen. So with the Octava factory, then out of that formed Octava Microphones.
I see.
So there's a distinction there. So before before the fall of the Soviet Union, Octava was just a factory owned by the government that manufactured microphones. This is the factory that will make the microphones.
Right.
And then after that folded, it's like, well, what now? Someone popped up and snatched the name Octava and made it into a company and started manufacturing microphones that are very, very loosely based on the originals. Yeah.
But they're not the original people. They're not the original designers.
I doubt that they're the original designers because Octava didn't design mics. They only manufactured them. And those mics were designed by a lot of the really nice mics were designed by the IRPA Institute, the Popov Institute.
I'm sorry, by the who?
The Popov Institute. In Russian, it's called IRPA, IRPA.
Uh-huh.
And I'll tell you what it stands for because I have to check my notes. Popov's Institute for Broadcasting, Radio Reception, and Acoustics. So this is a very small, specialized laboratory that designed some of my favorite Russian mics. And these were the mics that, if they ever went to mass production, and very few did, the Octava factory would make them. This is one of my favorite Soviet mics of all time. It's the MK13. And Octava manufactured the MK13. It's the only tube mic that Octava manufactured during the Soviet Union, and it was designed by the Popov Institute.
Is that a tube mic?
Oh yeah, it's the only electronically switched multi-pattern Soviet tube mic.
It looks like a, sort of vaguely like a 414.
It does, yeah. And they made a shorter solid state version that looks more like a 414.
It looks very cool.
It looks very cool. And this mic wins almost every vocal mic shootout. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's a double-sided M7. It uses that 6S31B tube I was telling you about, the AC701 tube. And so this is the other half. So there's Lomo, Kinap, Lomo, that side of things. And then there's IRPA and Octava, and that's this side of things. And these are sort of less known than the Lomos, which is too bad.
They're certainly less known at my house. Reality is, I've been dealing microphones since 1977. I've never seen a single one of any of these. Back in the day, nobody ever mentioned a Russian microphone to me in any way, shape, or form.
Well, people didn't start discovering them at all until the 90s, after the Soviet Union fell. And even then, I think, I started finding them on eBay. So Octava is more known for dynamics and ribbon mics. And so most of the Soviet ribbon mics were made by Octava, and they're fantastic mics, honestly. But my understanding is, especially in Chicago in the 90s, you could find some Lomo tube mics for dirt cheap,
In Chicago?
Yeah, and that's where I interned at Electrical Audio.
Not at any recording studio that I was ever in Chicago, and I was in a lot of them.
Well, that's where. So do you know Albini's Electrical Audio? He's a big fan of Lomo microphones.
I know Steve.
So he sort of. A lot of people attribute him to a lot of people know of Lomo mics because of him. He's a huge fan of them. He's been using them since the 90s. And, but since then, obviously more people find out about them. The thing is, they were made in such small quantities. Like this 1989 is the most well-known mic and the most manufactured mic of all of them. And they made 1,500.
Is soy 1,500 microphones? They made way less than 1,500 Elam 251s.
Well, yeah, that's an Elam 250, right?
Does Soyez relate to these companies somehow?
Somewhat, yeah. They're a Soviet mic company. A lot of the designs, my understanding, are influenced by some of these. The capsule designs, the transformer designs. They are manufactured, my understanding is, either in the same Tula's the city. They're manufactured in Tula, possibly in the same plant that Octava mics were made in, or if not, on some of the same equipment, possibly some of the same engineers, but they are influenced by the Soviet mics.
They're very
sure.
good. They're very good microphones.
Very good mics. Yeah,
Yeah,
I like them a
very
lot.
good microphones. Are they still making M7 capsules in Russia?
Well, I believe the Soyuz mics are center terminated M7. No, they're edge terminated, I believe. I believe the Soyuz mics.
Well, I don't mean the
Designed-
Soyuz. I mean
Oh.
anybody.
Well, I know they are. They're manufacturing capsules, and they're handmade, all in house there. And who else? There's a small company called NICFI, which came from the old days. That was a research institute in Moscow. In fact, this mic I showed you is one of the few NICFI mics that were
It's
made.
like a
in Soviet
D12,
Russia.
but it's a condenser mic, right?
It's a tube condenser, yeah.
And that's wow. It's a small body, isn't it?
So
Interesting.
small.
Interesting.
Well, here's the smallest. Hold on. So the mic I'm talking into is the prototype of this, which is the 19A14.
Yeah.
And now, as you can imagine, the transformer's not in this mic, but the tube sits in the back behind the capsule. And this is an M7 style capsule, but it's dual diaphragm. I'm not sure why. The back, it has a dead diaphragm in the back. So only the front is polarized.
Uh-huh.
And so, and it's got this cool built-in shock mount.
Uh-huh. That's
And,
cool looking.
Very clever little mic. Yep.
Yeah. Are you putting one of those on Tom-Toms?
No, it doesn't.
No, huh? No?
I don't want anyone hitting it.
Okay. All right. What about this question? Do you know anything? Oh, sorry. Do you know anything about about Russian radio buying large quantities of Neumann microphones?
I don't know anything about. Is this something you've heard about?
The story, and I don't know where it came from, that I have heard was that Russian broadcast was the second largest customer for Neumann microphones. But what do I know?
I mean, I do know the one rumor I've heard, that 19A1, that M49 copy I showed you.
Yeah.
My understanding was that the first 50 were made with genuine Neumann M7 capsules. So maybe that's part of the story, is they bought 50 M49s so they could copy it and make their own. You know, that's a
They
possibility.
bought 50 M49s. I see. Interesting.
That's my understanding.
Is the rumor.
I mean, I've seen rumors that start like 3 weeks ago get stretched into something.
But
else.
you're probably familiar with the MGM church microphone.
I'm not familiar.
The church microphone, Frank Church, who was the head tech at MGM, bought 200 in 1955, I think, but 200 U47 tops with capsules. And then he built this microphone that had a custom made, I think it was a UTC output transformer, and used a 6072, like a C12. And so they made 200 of them. And the guy, he bought those parts from the German sellers in Germany. The American importer was so mad about it, he refused to ever sell Neumann parts to anybody in the United States ever again.
Oh my God.
Anyways, the church microphone, that's when it works right, man, it is a great microphone. Really great.
Hey, I found that the tube used in the 19A9 is the 6J1P. I said
6J.
1P.
Okay.
It also might be 6G1P. It depends how you translate the J letter. And that's that's a socketed tube, like a 12AX7. A lot of the other tubes are, you know, they're not socketed. They're you just have to solder them.
Hold on one sec. Nina, I'm doing an interview. I'll call you back.
You said you don't edit these, so I guess that's
there you go. Well, she'll know. So anyways, this is fantastic information. My gosh. Uh, um, are they manufacturing vinyl discs in Russia?
I did look into that, and I'm sure someone is somewhere, but not.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying.
Because I don't know about in Indiana, but uh, uh, my friends who are making records they're the pressing plants are back ordered
Yeah,
like a year.
it's a year. Yeah.
Yeah, and the quality of the products can be,
Buddy.
what about Russian stereo microphones?
Hey, I'm glad you asked. I am obsessed. Well, I'm obsessed with all Russian mics, but let me show you one of my favorite Russian mics. This is an IRPA, that Popov Institute.
Uh-huh.
It's an MK14.
Wow.
There were possibly, I believe, 50 or less made.
Wow. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. It
Yeah.
is, there's two large diaphragm, double-sided M7 capsules, so it's fully multi-pattern. You can turn the top capsule by 270 degrees.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And what this is basically a stereo MK13.
Uh-huh.
And it sounds fantastic. I got this mic from, do you know Larry DeVivo, Silver Tone Mastering?
I'm sorry?
Larry DeVivo.
Yeah.
He owns Silvertone Mastering, and this was his favorite mic of all time. And I saw in a photo he had it, and I bugged him for years. And finally, he gave in. And and believe it or not, I just found a second one.
All right.
Because I've got all these crazy Russian contacts. All my buddies out there.
I bet. That's quite a microphone. So that's like basically like
An SM2 sort of.
Yeah.
Well,
no, like an SM69.
69.
Yeah.
And here's the power supply for it. So.
Oh, uh-huh.
There's
Sure. Yeah.
pattern.
Yeah. What's the? Can I see the connector on the other side?
Yeah. So we keep a lot of these plugged in because these military connectors are a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And let's see. I've got a more modern one. Hold on. I'll be right back.
Well, I don't know about you, but this is incredible. This is fantastic information. Mike obviously knows this stuff inside and out.
And this is, I was telling you about like the late 80s and early 90s Lomo.
Yeah.
That's what this is. It's a Lomo 1953. It's a cool design. Here you've got a little switch that changes the angle of the two small diaphragm capsules. Then you've got a pad, high pass filter. And
So
this mic,
this is a small capsule microphone.
it is, yeah. It's transformerless. And this is what became Nevaton. And they make a mic. They made a mic that looks identical to this. That was called the MC48. And they don't make it anymore. But this is a great sounding mic. Good for classical work.
And is that a tube mic?
This is not. So this is 1988. It's a solid state transformerless that, that's
so it's yeah. So it's sort of like a AKG C34 or something.
Something, yeah. It's a much sort of clearer, kind of harder sound, but a nice. And then I don't have it now. It's with Peluso, really rare MK8 mic. It's the only one I've seen, and it's a fixed, like in a 90-degree angle, also dual diaphragm M7 type stereo mic. So those are the only stereo Soviet mics that I know of. I'm a big fan of stereo mics. So.
Amazing. This is amazing stuff. Well, I think this is more than I can digest.
I could go on forever, man.
Yeah, I think so, and I bow down to your knowledge. It's fantastic to talk to you and to hear about this stuff and to see these things. My gosh, you've got quite a collection there. I maybe we could do another interview later on, and I can't thank you enough for joining me.
I'm honored to be on your show, and I'd love to do it again if you guys want to dig deeper into these crazy.
Totally.
I can open one up. I can prepare some recording samples. We can.
That it would be just great. All right,
I would
Mike, listen. Yeah,
I
sorry.
was going to say, yeah, if anyone out there is interested in these Soviet mics, obviously you can find me. There's not any other Mike Bridavskys out there, but I have an Instagram and Facebook page dedicated. It's called Soviet American Audio Systems, and I try to at least once or twice a week post a mic and talk about its history and all that stuff. And so if you're interested,
I'm going to check that out, and
cool.
so should you. So should you. Thanks so much, Mike.
Thanks
You
a lot,
take
Dan.
care. You have a great day.
You
Yeah,
too.
thank
Take
you
it easy,
very
man.
much. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it too.
Yeah.
Thanks.